So I make it nearly 6, or almost exactly. If we can have confirmation that the live stream's running. Thank you. Welcome this evening to our full council meeting, 14th of July 2021. Can I start with the evacuation procedure? A fire drill is not expected, so if it goes off, it's real. Please take heed. Can we all leave the building quickly and calmly? If you can leave by the nearest fire exit or the exit you came through, we all assemble over the road at what is the Yorkshire Bank. It's now got a big Virgin Money sign on it. If anybody needs assistance, they should raise their hand and they'll be assisted by members of staff. Apologies, item 2. Obviously, we're still under COVID restrictions, so that has limited the number of councillors that we have in attendance tonight. It is a politically balanced proportion of members that are in attendance. All the others, we will be minuting their apologies unless there are any objections to that. Item 3, filming. All members are required to turn on their microphones before speaking, and then please turn them off again promptly after. A microphone will be provided for members of the public to speak one way and another so that you can be picked up on the live stream. I'm not sure if we've got any members of the public that will be speaking tonight, though. I'd like to move on to agenda item 4, minutes, to confirm the minutes of the council meeting held on the 19th of May 2021, attached as page 10, and also the extraordinary council meeting that was held on the 30th of June 2021, page 24 of the agenda. Now, I know there was one amendment to the minutes relating to incorrectly named councillor. There was a B there instead of, I think, their other initial. That's been corrected. Are there any other amendments to those minutes, or are we content to accept those? So that's seconded. Oh, Councillor Shepherd.
To support the minutes of the 18th of May, but as I was not in attendance, I will have to abstain from accepting the minutes of the 30th of June.
Right, so as there's no objections, other objections, it's been moved and seconded. We'll accept those minutes as true and accurate. Thank you. We move on to item 5, which is declarations of interest. Other than those printed and provided to the council, are there any further declarations of pecuniary interest that anybody wants to make? Councillor Condacourt.
Just declare that my interests haven't been updated. We have emailed the officers yet again because it still has me down as my old interest before the election.
And that will be in the published pack. Thank you. Any other declarations? We're all good. Great. If we can move on to announcements, then item 6. I have no special announcements, but Councillor Wilson, I believe you have an announcement to make.
I don't think it will have escaped anyone's notice about the events on Sunday about the England football match where we got to the final for the first time in 55 years. So I think it is appropriate to put on record this council's congratulations to the England football team for getting as far as it did, and also the brilliant works which have been done across the borough in supporting them. Indeed, myself and Councillor Clark went down to go visit the mural on the wall at the Bullring, which I think is a tremendous asset to the borough, and they have raised more than enough for the initial defibrillator that they wanted, and they are working towards more, and I wish them every success in breaching that secondary target. But, thank you very much, members, I'm sure that will be replicated across the spectrum, but there have been, since the final, instances online of racism against particularly the 3 members of the team who were unsuccessful. And whilst as a nation we are saddened that we didn't actually win the final, we should be more than happy with the fact that we got to where we did and acknowledge that racism has no place in modern day sport or anywhere within our society. And as a council, I hope I can speak as a unanimous chamber on this one. We stand with those players who have been receiving that abuse online, they are football players regardless of the colour of their skin. And as the great Martin Luther King said, a person should be judged not on the colour of their skin, but on the content of their character. And I think that absolutely applies in today's society, and I would hope that the majority, if not all, of Nuneaton and Bedworth would agree with those sentiments too.
Thank you, Councillor. I believe Councillor Evans also has an announcement.
Sound on the YouTube broadcast.
Officers to look into that now. Thank you, Councillor Galby. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's two things I would like to bring to Council's attention on the subject of sport. I'm pleased to say that there will be a national athletics event taking place at the Pingles on Sunday. We will be having teams from across the country coming into the borough to participate in this event, and I'm sure Council will welcome the investment this will bring to the borough and the fact that Nuneaton is being put on the national sporting map. I'd also like to report to Council that we have been successfully awarded over £23,000 from the Arts Council National Lottery Projects Grant Scheme towards the museum's new exhibition on the Nuneaton Abbey. And we will be working alongside our partners at St Mary's Church in the Abbey Ward, which I'm sure Councillor Shepherd will warmly welcome. And I hope that residents in the borough will take up this opportunity to visit the exhibition for free.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. That's good news, and I think we all commend the officers and people that put the bid in to get that funding. Sounds great. If there's no other announcements, if nobody else wants to speak, I'm sure we all in the Chamber unanimously echo the sentiments of Councillor Wilson with regard to stamping out racism in sport and indeed society. And we also echo the very positive comments about the great work that the people in the community have done to raise the money for the defibrillator. Something really artistic and productive, and well done to them. And if we could record that in the minutes, I think that would be fitting. So that brings us on to business deferred from the Council of the 21st of April. Just to explain again, that council ran out of time. There are standing orders that say that the council comes to a hard stop after 3 hours, any council meeting, unless those standing orders are suspended. They were not suspended in time, and so the items get carried on to the next normal full council, which is this one. Councillor Wilson.
I proposed on the agenda paper at the meeting in April. However, as there has been in the meantime an election and a change in administration, which negates the need for the motion, I would seek leave of council to withdraw the motion. Thank you.
Seconder for that. Councillor Walmsley. This is a procedural item, so there's no debate on this. We'll just move straight to the vote. So if I can have a show of hands, all those in favour of withdrawing that item? All those against?
Chair, can you record my vote as well, please?
If you could record the councillor's vote. Any abstentions? Great.
Mr. Mayor, apologies, but I think you've skipped part B of 7, which is about the questions held over from last council too.
Is questions, as I said, from members that were held over from the last item. There are 2 of them. Councillor A. Sargent. And there was another one from Councillor Condacor. I believe that the answers will be provided by Councillor Golby and Councillor Wilson, who will also read out the question. Or is Brent, do you have a microphone that you could read them out?
I'll do.
Ah.
Councillor Condacor wants to ask his first.
Okay, we'll change the order. Councillor Condicourt, as you're here, you get a chance to ask it in person.
Yeah. This obviously was to the previous leader, so I'll change the sex of the leader in the question. Hopefully the council leader is already aware that Warwickshire County Council is looking to solve the daytime crewing problem at Bedworth by relocating one of Nuneaton's 2 remaining crews. It is clearly unacceptable to cut the size of the borough fire crews again after already reducing the size of a standard crew on each appliance. Does the council leader agree with me that the borough needs fully crewed fire appliances, and will he seek to ask the management team to ensure that the borough council monitors any further plans that will emerge after the election? Obviously that's slightly tense now, but you get the gist.
Condicourt. Councillor Wilson.
Condicourt, for your question. As Councillor Condicourt will be aware, having until just recently been a county councillor, that the responsibility of the fire and rescue service is with Warwickshire County Council. During his time, I understand that he asked many questions of the portfolio holder, Councillor Andy Crump, who has answered a number of points that he has raised with him. The proposals to which Councillor Condicourt refers have been led by the Fire and Rescue Service themselves, and I am confident that they would not sign off on any plan that would endanger the residents of Nuneaton or Bedworth, and nor would I support any that did. Neither Councillor Condicourt or I are trained in the field of fire and rescue. However, as leader of the council, I will not engage in the politics of fear and attempt to stir up a storm over these proposals that will unnecessarily worry our residents. I will maintain a watching brief, and I can assure Councillor Condicourt that officers will monitor the development and impact of these plans on our borough. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Mr Wilson. So if we can cover the question that came from Councillor A. Sargent, I believe Councillor Golby, you're going to read that question and provide the answer. Thank you.
The question, I'm going to need to read it out as written. However, it's not for Councillor Watkins, it's for me now. So it says, can the portfolio holder for housing and communities, Councillor Watkins, give the residents of Roxburgh Road an assurance that the green space, pavements and curbs will be returned to their previous condition, if not better, at the council's and Mod Pod's development at the old garage site? So, as I can say, it was aimed at Councillor Watkins, but I will be responding. So, my response to that is the contract administrator on Roxburgh Road development has given Councillor Sargent reassurances that the green area adjacent to the site will return to the condition it was prior to the development starting. With regards to the curbstones and footpaths, a condition survey was carried out prior to works commencing, which will be used to determine the extent of the work required. It's worth noting the curbstones and footpaths were not in a very good condition prior to works commencing. Thank you, Chair.
Right, we'll move on to item 8 then, public participation. To hear and answer questions by any resident of the borough concerning the work of the council where notice has been given, pursuant to Procedure Rule 9, and they are attached at page 48. Again, this is not subject for debate. Before we continue, I can tell you that as it does appear there are continuing problems with the sound with the live stream, we are actually recording the sound, and that will be on the recording that goes out. And I'm sure officers will continue in the meantime to see if they can get the actual live stream sound working too.
Smith's portfolio, so he'll be answering the question.
Councillor Smith, if you could read the question and give your response. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Alsage. Town Plan NUN 356 aims to sell for housing the Johnson Road, Bedworth, Elizabeth Centre area that holds over 50 cars at peak times, often bringing up to 100 children a day, 7 days a week, for football training and matches at the leased and reinstated Johnson Road Recreation Ground. There is virtually no non-residential parking on Johnson Road or the Tewkesbury Drive estate, a cul-de-sac, and current plans provide only a replacement 18 places in an unsafe and unsuitable position. This will cause severe traffic problems, endangering child safety and put in doubt the future of Bedworth Eagles Junior Football Club. Will the Council commit to review this non-strategic plan urgently before the sale of the land and be open to the planned review or effective reversal or effective mitigation? And my response to that is I thank Dr. Sage for his question and would like to congratulate him and the team of volunteers at Bedworth Eagles for the success of the club since taking on the Johnson Road Recreation Ground and reinstating it to be one of the best grounds in this borough. The land at the old Elizabeth Centre site was included in the borough plan by the previous administration as a non-strategic site and can only be removed from the borough plan as part of the review process that's currently underway and due for completion in early 2023. As of now, no planning applications have come forward for this site. The previous administration, as well as delivering a third-rate borough plan that included this site, also left a legacy of financial mismanagement that has the potential to seriously impact on the future provision of key leisure facilities in the Miners' Welfare Park. And to address this issue, it is possible the Council will have to raise revenue from the sale of this land to partially fund the development of the new leisure centre. You will know from our recent meetings we are fully aware and sympathetic to the issue you raise and will continue to work with you and explore ways of finding a suitable solution to this problem. Thank you.
Before we proceed any further to question 2 from Mr. Margrave, we're going to take a short break to reboot the system to try and get the sound onto the live stream. So I would beg your indulgence while we just see if we can sort out the technical issues. Hope everyone's okay with that. Thank you. I'm just turning the microphone on to give them something to pick up and test if the live stream sound is now working. Hopefully it is. We need to have the test card, really, don't we, like they used to on BBC Two. And we've all gone quiet. We need to keep talking so that there's some sound to pick up.
Mr. Mayor, you've War and Peace right now.
I don't know if we've got any feedback from external viewers, whether they're now starting to get the live stream with sound. Are they getting the live stream, but just not the sound still? We'll see what we can do. We'll give it another couple of minutes and then we will... Are we still working on it, Brent? Yeah. We'll give it a couple of minutes. Yeah. Ah, right. Okay, so that's good. We're... Yeah. You're right there in the sun, Councillor Sekovic. I was going to say you can.
I was going to say the bold spot. You obviously have this problem. The bold spot never gets quite enough. So
If it's getting in your eyes, you can move. You'd be equid distance.
mine will disappear soon.
Ah.
It's not like we've seen a lot of it over the last few weeks. Anyway.
Oh no.
It's not very close to it.
It's like a scene from the Blues Brothers. You're just about to do some sort of backflip.
If I start talking, you speak, you need to tell us.
There is a faint resemblance. You just need a pork pie hat.
Yeah, well, I'm a dead ring of the J, aren't I?
Right. So.
No, we've still not got audio, we can't
Okay. So it is recording though. We're sure. We're definitely sure we're recording. Great stuff. So on the basis that it's recording, but I'm afraid the live stream that they can, if they can turn it on even without the sound, just so people can, kind of pick up with the show of hands and everything. Thank you, members, for your indulgence there. It was worth having a try, I think, as long as it's being recorded. Then we will press on, and actually to speed the process up, I think Councillor Walmsley has very kindly offered to read out the questions, and then they'll be responded to in turn after he's read them out. So, Councillor, with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question is on behalf of Mr. Sam Margrave. Under the oversight of the then Cabinet member, Councillor Chris Watkins, the Council applied to the Chancellor's Green Homes grant to secure some of the generous and substantial funding government has made available to help residents in the borough. However, the Council failed to secure any money for the reasons given below, despite the neighbouring authority in North Warwickshire securing £320,000. Lord Callaghan, the Minister responsible for the scheme at the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, cited the following reasons for the failing application. Quote, 1. Costs provided for capital spend by Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council within the cost breakdown table did not match the total amount of capital funding the local authority had requested. This meant the assessors were unable to determine the correct figure to base the assessment on. Quote 2 from Lord Callaghan. This initial bid didn't allow them, Bays, to determine the amount of funding being requested. Quote 3, Lord Callaghan. Given an opportunity to rectify this, the resubmission costs did not match their original submission and so were rejected. Mr Margrave continues, can the leader of the council confirm that the cabinet member at the time was ultimately responsible for the failure to add up or provide appropriate figures and provide a detailed estimate of how much funding the error in the department Councillor Watkins was responsible for has cost the taxpayer in potential help for residents of this borough? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Golby, who is the portfolio holder for Housing and Communities, will answer the question.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Golby.
Thank you, Chair. The submission of bids is an operational matter undertaken by officers of the Council, and it would not be appropriate for I or any other members to get directly involved in these sorts of things. The rejected bid was for £1.4 million. And yes, there will have been an indirect cost to the taxpayer in the time it took council staff to work on the bids the first time around, and then again when it was returned for amendment. However, what the financial value of this is, I can't say. Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council is a member-led organisation. While I'm aware this has been dealt with from an officer perspective, and I wouldn't have expected Councillor Watkins to have gotten his calculator out to add everything up, he was the portfolio holder at the time, and this was on his watch. £1.4 million is no small sum and could have gone a very long way. He certainly should have been involved to such a degree to have had oversight enough to ask, had the numbers been added up correctly. This was a pretty significant bid, which we were given a second chance at, but it was still incorrect when it was resubmitted. Unfortunately, it was a missed opportunity to provide further support to our residents, but officers have assured me that the error has been corrected and future bids will not suffer the same fate. Thanks, Chair. And the camera's not moving now either.
Thank you, Councillor Golby. Actually, given that the cameras aren't moving, can officers check that we actually are recording? But we will continue. Anyway, the next question, question 3, Councillor Walmsley, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This question is from Mr Brian Walmsley. I read with interest in our local press that the council is planning to refuse to replace air conditioning equipment at Bedworth Civic Hall in order to fund their free car parking plans across the borough. Can the leader of the council give us categoric assurance that there will be no risk that any such failure of the facilities at the Civic Hall will have an impact on the wonderful vaccination work being carried out by our NHS? Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I thank the Labour candidate for Weddington for his question. Firstly, I would like to clarify that the issue with the system relates to a control panel and not the air conditioning unit itself. Having investigated this particular item on the Capital Works programme, it has been confirmed that this issue has been outstanding for 3 years. I make that at least since 2018. As he will be aware, the Labour Party were in charge in 2018, 2019, 2020 and, thankfully, only part of 2021. During all that time, they had the option to carry out the works but did not do so, and the system still works. I am delighted to confirm that the Council is working hard with its health partners to support the delivery of the vaccination programme. The use of the Civic Hall in Bedworth has played an important part in this process to support local delivery from as far back as last September-October, when flu jabs commenced. This followed COVID testing and now vaccination delivery. We continue to maintain and manage the site as has been the case previously. We have simply pushed back the replacement of the panel as the works required would mean intruding into the controlled vaccination area, something that is not appropriate given the need for a controlled vaccination environment. The works have been moved to the next financial year, taking account of the current use of the Civic Hall. I cannot give a zero-risk assurance as much as any other person could as to equipment failure, but we will work with addressing any issues should they arise at the site. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Have we reached a conclusion on the recording? So, is it recording, though, at all? It is recording, definitely, because the cameras aren't swapping. But it is recording. Great, okay. So as long as we continue to use the microphones, at least it'll be picked up. Thank you. If we can move on to question 4 then, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a question from Mrs. Michelle Condacor. Many of the play areas around the borough are overdue for improvement, and whilst it was good to see some mention in the recent budget of some areas, others are at the end of their lives and were not mentioned. She continues, Buttermere Play Park area has had no significant work done for some 40 years now, and with the recent developments is being used by considerably more families. Ms. Condacor continues, I understand that some of the monies from Bellway have already been given to the council, and when can residents expect to see work done to upgrade and modernise the play area?
Point of order, Councillor Condacor.
I was told my wife's question would be read out by an officer. The questions having words missed out, as did Mr. Walmsley's question, by the Conservative councillor who's reading the question out. Can we have the question read in full by an officer, please? Thank you.
We took advice earlier before the meeting, Councillor, and apparently anybody can read out the questions. We were expecting a full house, and so there weren't going to be free officers by a microphone. The key thing is that whoever reads it out needs to be by a microphone, and obviously another councillor is. So I take your point, but I think everybody got the gist of the question
Mr.
there,
Mayor,
Councillor.
words have been missed out, like particularly Coronation Walk, Sandon Park, etc. So I do think questions need to be read out fully if someone else is going to read them out.
Fair comment, Councillor, and the couple of words that were missed you've just mentioned and put into the record, so we're all good on that. We obviously have had the question. We need the appropriate answer. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the absence of the portfolio holder because of COVID restrictions, I'll answer this question. Since taking office in May as a new administration, we have found that several of our policies are out of date, which includes our play strategy. Therefore, we are currently reviewing several of our strategies, including the play strategy, to develop a strategic approach to supporting improvements and additional capacity across the borough's 50+ play area sites. The council does receive Section 106 contributions from new housing developments, and these are based upon negotiated agreements and with staged payments being received over a period of time. The Section 106 contributions are to support additional capacity at specified sites. However, until a few weeks ago, we did not have a dedicated Section 106 officer to chase and monitor payment of the financial obligations. Our new officer has made a fantastic start, and we will be reviewing what we have shortly. As part of the new play strategy, an action plan will be developed as to how to maximise the use of the contributions and future capital investment to make best use of the funds and make the biggest impact for residents. We will be looking at future procurement opportunities, such as working with a chosen contractor or contractors across the whole borough and not at individual sites where we will lose efficiencies of scale. Furthermore, I am aware that there are some sites in our borough that have had developments and some contributions paid over as part of the first tranche of obligations under their planning consents, particularly in Weddington and St Nicholas. But there are additional phases of building which will attract additional financial contributions. This will mean more money available for those areas and more potential for improving the play equipment we have. We feel it is better to allow some of this money to accumulate so that even better services can be provided in the long run. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. And now if we can come to, I believe, the fifth and final question on behalf of Mr. Carl Mayer. Councillor Walmsley, if you'd like to read that out, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The following is from Mr. Carl Mayer. How refreshing it was to read agenda item 15 on tonight's full council meeting. At last, a council that listens to this borough's residents' concerns about the borough plan. Instead of ploughing on regardless like the ousted Labour group, did with their developer's charter plan. The action group, he continues, the action group fully supported this motion and hopes the three MPs will explain to the Secretary of State that our plan should be put on the back burner until Coventry's dubious housing targets are confirmed by the ONS, given the ousted Labour group's decision to accept 4,020 extra homes on top of our borough's actual need through the Memorandum of Understanding with Coventry City Council. Mr Mayor continues, the current review process is welcome, but in my opinion is 2 years too late, thanks to the previous ruling regime and a timescale process that could result in all sites in the borough plan being approved before the review consultation. How crazy would it be for this borough to complete in time its borough plan, to then find out it was adopted on flawed figures? It needs halting as soon as possible until we find out the truth. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Walmsley. Now, I understand that the portfolio holder responsible, Councillor Smith, will be responding to this. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I thank Mr Mayor for his statement of support for tonight's Memorandum of Understanding motion on behalf of the Woodlands Action Group. I'm fully aware of how much time and effort Mr Mayor and the Woodlands Group have invested in trying to secure a positive outcome for the Woodlands as part of the borough plan process. Much of their efforts fell on deaf ears. I also remember a long ago election promise from the Labour group that they would give the Woodlands protected status as Greenbelt and it would never be developed. Mr Mayor, that was an election promise made and an election promise very quickly broken. I'm confident that by the end of proceedings tonight, the Conservatives will have made this election promise in May. There is another election promise kept within just 8 weeks of control. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That concludes item 8. We'll move on to item 9, special urgency decisions. They are as set out in the agenda. They are for questions and noting, but not debate. So, Councillor Wilson, any member? Okay, if we have no member wishing to speak on that, then we will move along to item 10, the Cabinet Report. Again, this is questions only. It's not for debate. Any member on the Cabinet Report? Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you much, Chair. I've got two at least. I'll start with the first one to Councillor Smith, which is about the 28th of May Cabinet meeting when we launched the Borough Plan consultations. I was at the Hime Lane School, was it last night or the night before last? And it was really good to talk to you there and a few members of the public, but the publicity was yet again not good enough. I know it's better than it was under the Labour days when it put in touch after it closed, but can we please tell us how we're going to improve the telling people about these events, because there's a lot of people set it up and yet there might have only been 10 members of the public there. Thank you, Chair.
So, Councillor Smith, if you'd like to respond to that.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Condacourt, for the question. I have addressed the issue of advertising these events. They have been publicly advertised across the social media platforms. I am taking steps to boost them further and make sure that specific sites, rather than the menu of sites, are shown the day before and on the day of the actual event, just to remind people that those events are taking place on that day. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Reference to page 50 of the agenda, item 2 brackets D, the Cabinet meeting of the 26th of May. Could Councillor Smith, the portfolio holder, please give us an update about progress with the gypsy and traveller site allocations within the borough plan, as this is an issue of concern to residents living in affected areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Brown, for the question. The Gypsy and Traveller DPD is currently being consulted on as part of the Borough Plan Review. To support this work, we've recently commissioned a Gypsy and Traveller accommodation assessment. The current Borough Plan shows a need for 44 Gypsy and Traveller sites up to 2032. The new Gypsy and Traveller accommodation assessment has reduced this figure to a need of just 16 plots, up to 2038, a reduction of 28 plots. We're currently exploring options to allocate this need within existing provision sites with a view to removing the need for any new sites in the Greenbelt up to 2038, which will be the end of the current plan that's in review.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. Councillor Walmsley, you'd indicated.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And this is another question for Councillor Smith. It's bob up and down evening for you, sir. My question is in relation to item 3B on the agenda item of the 23rd of June 2021 in respect to the PSPOs on the control of begging in the town centre. I'm sure he'll agree with me the concern that's been raised many times by members of the public and particularly family to see some of the really distressing scenes that have been witnessed by them and young children in the town centre in the middle of broad daylight. Can I have his assurance and can he give me an indication of following on from this review when we are to hear the outcome of the consultation and when we might be able to get those PSPOs into position?
Thank you, Councillor Walmsley. Councillor Smith?
I'm actually unable to answer that because it's not my portfolio, unfortunately. I'm not sure if Councillor Golby has the answer either at this moment.
Sorry, I was listening. Oh, it was listening to you.
Councillor Golby, you're going to respond.
I will. I'll respond as far as I can off the cuff. And the consultation for the town centre begging PSPO actually went live today. So I would urge everybody to respond to the consultation with their views on whether this PSPO should be made put into place. And without presupposing the outcome of the consultation, I can't tell you whether or not it will go live or not, I'm afraid. But please, everybody, respond to the consultation. It did go live today. It's on the website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Golby. Any other member who hasn't already spoken? Councillor Condacourt, you wanted to come back in again?
Yeah, this is on a second item, Chair. On the leisure strategy, which is on page 43, it was discussed at the Cabinet meeting and it was mentioned about the underfunding of the Bedworth design work. You were talking about Rebas or whatever at the meeting, but we also mentioned inflation and costs and Britex and steel costs and all the other things. Could the Cabinet member tell us when we'd have an idea what the financing cost for Bedworth Leisure Centre was in terms of the gap, and if we're going to have to descale it or find new routes of funding? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll call upon Councillor Evans. It's your portfolio.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, REBA is what I refer to. That stands for the Royal Institute for British Architects. And when we deliver multi-million-pound projects, we are, as an authority and multi-million-pound organisations are expected to follow REBA stages. We've got up to REBA stage 3 for the Bedworth Physical Activity Hub, and in order to progress that project, we need to go on to REBA Stage 4. We have submitted our innovative bid for the Levelling Up Fund. We've submitted a bid for £15 million, and we intend to carry out REBA Stage 4 and finance REBA Stage 4 through the Levelling Up Fund if awarded. I obviously hope that the the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government will look upon our bid in a positive way. I think it's a great bid, and our officers have worked very hard on the bid, and I know that the Local Enterprise Partnership has supported our bid, as well as Sports England. So I am cautiously optimistic that we will be awarded that funding. But I won't stand here today and say that the financial situation is great. It's not. We have already scaled back the facility, and most of the facilities within the designs are modest and basic, but our designs are supported by Sports England, and it is their view that our designs will meet the needs and the capacity for the local community. But I'm afraid that the previous Labour administration did not budget for REBA Stage 4. Whatever they say, there was no budget to fund that, and as we know from the Leader of the Opposition's statement at Cabinet recently, they knew full well how they would intend to fund it, but they decided they would not inform the residents at the election. So I think it's another green bin tax scenario where they knew full well that they had to fund it some way, but they didn't necessarily want to tell the residents how.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walmsley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just before going to a question, can I thank Councillor Evans and his officers? I know he was working up until the very small hours of the morning, along with officers, on the bid for the Luff bid. And I know a lot of hard work was put in by him and the officers, say very small hours of the morning working on this, right up into the deadline to get the best possible submission to give our borough the best chance. So hopefully, unlike the previous administration, his sums add up, and I'm sure they do. My question, Mr Mayor, would have been to Councillor Croft, but obviously for restrictions on COVID, he's not here this evening, so I'm hoping the leader might be able to answer this. In respect of the ARG on item H on the first Cabinet meeting, can he assure me that unlike the previous administration, we've read all of the FAQs submitted and given and published, and we won't be making the same mistakes as that were made in the past? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilson, do you want to answer that, please?
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Without wishing to put words in Councillor Croft's mouth, I do know that he has read the FAQs. He has them in great detail, and in fact I'm aware that he has a copy of them on his personal nearabouts quite often when we are talking about finance. So he is just as determined as I am that we do not fall back into the trap of the previous administration of making promises which can't be kept, and ensuring that we actually deliver for residents. What I can say is that at present we do believe we are on track to spend the ARG allocation that we currently have, and I know that Councillor Croft has taken a very active interest in ensuring that, and has been working with officers to follow progress, so that if we do spend the full ARG total, we do then qualify for the top-up in August, and we expect that to be somewhere in the region of £750,000 to £800,000, which, if we can secure that amount of money, will go a great deal of a way to help enabling us to continue to help businesses, particularly through the difficult COVID recovery over the coming months, because I think it's vital that we support our businesses and town centres as far as we can. They have been through a tremendous shock over the past 16 months, and we need to be able to fulfil our side of the bargain in supporting those businesses who have quite often in the past supported this authority in its aims and ambitions, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any other questions on the Cabinet report? No, I think we're all done there. In that case, I would like to move on to item 11, the Independent Remuneration Panel. Can I ask Councillor Wilson, do you wish to move any recommendations as a result of the IRP report?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I do wish to move a recommendation that the table in the additional paperwork is actually as approved at the annual council in May, and then we approve the additional recommendations from the IRP as printed in the paperwork. This council has already taken a view on where it believes its allowances should be, and also takes account of the work involved by cabinet members in the hard work that they put forward. I believe that is certainly across the chamber. Whilst I disagreed with many of the works that were undertaken by the previous Labour cabinet, at least they did actually undertake work, and they justified their salaries in large part. Well, their allowances, I should say, not salaries, because we're not actually salaried or considered to be employees as councillors. But I believe that the recommendations we put forward in May are fair, just and equitable to all those who hold a position of responsibility, and I don't see any need to alter them at this stage. There are additional recommendations such as removing the cap on the carers allowance, which I know is a cause quite close to some people's hearts in this chamber. It now reflects the fact that costs have increased, but that we also need to do our utmost as an authority to reduce and remove the barriers to participation in local democracy. And as I believe Councillor Walmsley put it at the Audit and Standards Committee, we never know when we are actually going to be on the other end of a devastating, life-changing event. But we are still people who want to commit and contribute to public life, and those who are interested in standing for council should not be dissuaded by being capped on their costs. I believe the recommendations from the IRP are reasonable in that regard. So I will move the recommendations as I have stated and look forward to hearing council's views. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you to Councillor Wilson. Seconder, Councillor Golby.
I'll second and reserve my right to speak. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. So I've got Councillor Evans, if you want to go first, and then Councillor Walmsley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know this isn't really for questions as such, but there is a sort of rhetorical question, if you like, that I would like to put to the leader for when he comes back to sum up. It's recently been reported by the fake news in Nuneaton that this council increased the special responsibility allowance for the licensing committee chair by 1,000%. And that was put on social media by the Labour group a few weeks after the election. Could you confirm that is certainly not the case? In fact, we reduced it, I think it was from £2,600 down to a mere £1,000. I think that cut is obviously something that we welcome, given the recent news article that we allegedly have Britain's highest paid councillor in Nuneaton.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walmsley.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Can I welcome the movements from Councillor Wilson this evening, and can I also welcome the fact that we are continuing with the allowances as set out at the annual council, which are lower than those, very much so in some cases, lower than those as set out in the table this evening. So I'm very glad to see that those are not being moved, but actually we are sticking with that, where we have had pay cuts for committee chairs of OSPs. Each individual will be receiving less than the person that did that job before them, as will all the cabinet members. And I think that's quite right, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, if I can, as it's been alluded to this evening, speak specifically about the dependent carers allowance element here. And this is something that has been brought to my attention on a number of occasions. When speaking with people considering to stand for council, both for my party and in more general terms when people have asked advice, one of the main barriers for a great number of people in our borough is that they have responsibilities of caring duties for loved ones. That might be their children, particularly single parents, and that might be for their loved ones if they have some form of disability that requires additional help. As Councillor Wilson said, and as I said at the Audit and Standards Committee, where we recommended a proposal along these lines to the review board, that none of us know when we may be hit, when we may require to support our loved ones. All it takes is a second, a slip, a fall, an accident of some description. And unfortunately, sometimes the pure unluck of God and Mother Nature and whatever everyone may believe in. That is all it takes for a person to suddenly go from being completely able-bodied to disabled. And whilst none of us would wish that on anybody, 4 years can be a long time for anybody. And circumstances of their families and their loved ones can change overnight. And I think, given we've had meetings, Mr. Mayor, previously, since I've been elected, in the 3 years that I've been elected, that have gone past midnight, so sometimes over 5 and even over 6 hours, a £30 cap paying minimum wage it does not cut anywhere near the level of support required for those people to undertake their duties as a councillor. And whilst I think it's important, because actually people that are carers and having a diversity of councillors brings a great section, a cross-section and thought of society into our meetings. People who are carers will be able to understand things that those who are not will never have to face. In fact, it was carers and friends of Councillor Golby that highlighted the complete lack of any adult changing facilities, disabled adult changing facilities in our borough. And she has worked tirelessly, can I just say, on those. So, Mr. Mayor, I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with these. I am very grateful to the review board for listening to that, and that the claim, the maximum claim now for support for our loved ones now will be the duration of the meeting plus half an hour either side to recognise travel time. I think that's a far more sensible solution to ensure that actually we are covering the meeting plus a little bit of reasonable travel time from our homes and back to our homes again. And actually this, I hope, will go a good way to bring a greater section of society into our chamber and open up further our democracy, which seems to be a theme of some of the items on tonight's agenda, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rudkin.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to rebut Councillor Evans and put the record straight. I believe the Labour group removed the SRA for the licensee committee. There was not, it was a joint, we removed it. It became under with the planning. So there wasn't an SRA. So to say, no, I'm sorry, that's correct. We removed it. So to say that £1,000, it is a 100% increase from nothing.
Yeah, if it's about something you've said, Councillor Evans, you can make a point of personal explanation.
I'm happy to explain what happened. The SRA was there. It was in the Constitution. It wasn't removed from the Constitution after the debacle with Councillor Elliott. The Labour group decided to take a decision to allow Councillor Hancock's to chair 2 committees, and the Constitution states that you're only entitled to 1 SRA. So I accept that the Labour group only had 1 member claiming the planning and licensing SRA, but the licensing SRA remained. It was £2,600 roughly, and we have reduced it down to £1,000. That's a fact, and it's in the council's constitution.
Thank you for your clarification, Councillor Evans. Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, we started off well, didn't we, with no bullying and things like that, but I see that Councillor Evans has to revert back to bullying and trying to intimidate one of my group again. Let me make it quite clear, Councillor Evans, you won't be bullying any of my group whilst I'm a leader. Am I rude enough to interrupt you when you're speaking? So please stop naming members of my group. And to put it right, there was 0 paid to the licensing. So when you pay there was 0 paid to the licensing because it was put in with the planning. And so when you pay £1,000, it's £1,000%. Also, your cabinet members have gone up by almost £2,000. Fact. You can do smoke and mirrors, but it doesn't matter. You can treat people stupidly, but it won't work. You can carry on shaking your head and interrupting and being rude. But I'm not bothered because you don't intimidate me. So just carry on being rude and let's just play the game. But the facts are, we removed it, there was zero, then you put it in, £1,000. Facts.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Condacor.
Chair, on a different matter, or almost related, I think the allowances are really important. I really do think they're about the right level. Some people are working really hard at the moment because of the change in administration, and I think some of the previous cabinet members worked really, really hard because of COVID. I really don't think the mantra in the public that councillors are overpaid is always right. Some obviously are, because obviously you get backbenchers who do less, and some backbenchers do 2 or 3 times the amount they're paid for, because it's an allowance. It is not working in a production line, being a councillor. So I think the allowance is supposed to cover some of your time, but not all of it. But one thing I would ask, if people are paid an allowance for special responsibilities, is they actually take part and do the job that the public's being paid for. I think the allowances are reasonable, but one thing that has particularly annoyed me, is the cancelling of the scrutiny committee for regeneration and planning that's coming up. I do think we need to actually manage our council well, so actually these very reasonable allowances are actually earned because the meetings work. And when people talk about 6 hours meetings, we actually need to make our council meetings more friendly for people who need to care for other people, and really try and get back to the 3-hour rule, because none of us really work well at 6 hours. And so I think if we do have a lock on, we need to have 2 meetings. And forget the discussion of allowances. I think we need to make it a better, more sociable job for those who've got people we love. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Golby, you reserved your right to speak.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to point out that actually what Councillor Evans said is correct. The licensing chair is still in the Constitution. The fact that the licensing chair was removed by the previous Labour group is neither here nor there. The fact is the SRA is still in the Constitution. It's in the published Constitution. It is still a position. We haven't made it up. We haven't put anything in. It was a position to be filled. Just because the Labour group saw fit not to fill it is not anybody over here's problem, and we certainly have not increased anything by 1,000%. So when you're talking about play on words, actually what was put out from the Labour group of the 1,000% comment was a play on words. Because just like I'll reiterate the fact, just because you don't fill a position, it doesn't make that position null and void. The position is still there. It's not our fault you've not got anybody capable to fill it. So yes, if anybody wants to look, Schedule 1 in the Constitution, it is there in black and white. I'd also like to point out that actually we have reduced SRAs because, again, the Deputy Leader, the position that I now hold, the previous Deputy Leader was paid £8,180. I get £7,000. And I work 45 hours a week, guaranteed for that. I don't think I know anybody else that would do what I do for the amount of money that I actually receive for it. So again, it is a reduction in what we've done. Now, I explained this meeting previously. Yes, we have increased a cabinet position. We have done that because we had no economic development lead in this borough, which, for the residents who want to know why we have had no economic development, It's because we haven't had anybody steering the economic development ship. And again, that was a Labour on a Labour cabinet. So we have come in, we have seen that there is a need and a gap and a necessity, and we have filled it. We did that by actually rejigging the SRAs of all of the existing cabinets. So we have done that to no additional cost to the taxpayer. We all agreed that that is what was necessary. We didn't want to add an extra burden financially to the taxpayer because Lord knows they've got enough. So we took the hit ourselves. We understand and appreciate that that is actually what we need to do. And if we have to do it, then we will do it. Again, it should have been done years ago. It wasn't. Now we've done it. So to say that we're costing the taxpayer more money, again, wrong, totally wrong. If you look in the document, it does actually state that we are underpaying ourselves. It's highlighted the leaders' SRA is not on par with what other councils pay their leaders. It's nowhere near, actually. And again, I reiterate the point. I get £7,000 and I am working a 45-hour week just being a councillor, just for this organisation. So we are hard-working, we are solid in what we do, and we are pushing forward with what we need to do for this borough, because that is what we agreed, that is what we should do. And there we go, we are doing it, we are standing by our commitments, and we are actually showing that we will take the hit ourselves. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Golby. If I could just interject there that SRA, special responsibility allowance, an additional allowance for somebody who takes on, as it says, a special additional responsibility, like being a cabinet member or the leader. I think it's worth us just repeating that, so it's on the video when people watch it, just in case they're not sure what that was all about. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Having been in opposition, I appreciate it can be sometimes difficult to find something to hang your hat on, but the opposition really are actually clutching at straws on this one. There's been no bullying going on in this chamber. It's just a manufactured attempt to deflect from the fact that they have no legitimate financial or political argument. The licensing allowance, to remind people, because it was actually my job to pay attention as Leader of the Opposition, so I actually did earn my crust when I was Leader of the Opposition. There was a proposal, I believe it was in January, February time, because the then Chair of Licensing decided to step down, they had to appoint a new Chair of Licensing. They picked Councillor Hancock's. There is a rule in this authority that you cannot claim two SRAs. The licensing position was not abolished. The licensing SRA was not abolished. It was put in abeyance because the rules stated you cannot claim two. The licensing allowance has gone from £2,600 to £1,000. Now, it's been a while since I did my GCSE maths, but I make £2,600 minus £1,000 a £1,600 saving. The leader, as Councillor Golby alluded to, was in the region of £12,500 before I took office. I now get £11,000 or thereabouts. I believe, again, if I've got my maths correctly, that is another cut of £1,500. And I am doing far more in terms of trying to regenerate our towns than the previous incumbent did. In the 8 weeks I have been in office, I've already had meetings with numerous businesses within the town. I have been to the town centres to meet with market traders on, I think out of the 8 weeks, probably at least 4 or 5 occasions in those 8 weeks in office. I have begun the process of setting up a town centre partnership. On Tuesday, I had the second of 6 town centre briefing sessions with the different sectors within our town centres, with another 4 to go. I have had meetings with retailers in the town centre. I have had meetings with the potential redevelopment opportunities within Nuneaton and in Bedworth. I have this afternoon just taken a single member decision to go out to consultation on the potential for putting out Bedworth Market back into All Saints Square. I think I'm doing far more than the previous incumbent did to regenerate our towns, and yet I've taken a pay cut before I even started. So perhaps, I'm aware that there are some adult education courses going, that perhaps people ought to refresh their maths skills in that respect. And that's perhaps why we are in the financial difficulties this authority is finding itself since we took control. So I will move the recommendations as I did before. I believe they are a fair and accurate representation of the work we do, save that we have been benchmarked against other authorities and we are underpaid, but I do not detect an appetite across the chamber for an increase in any allowances, nor do I believe at a time when we are going through COVID recovery it would be appropriate for us to pay ourselves more as councillors at the same time that people are on furlough or potentially losing their jobs as a result of the pandemic. So I believe that the recommendations before us tonight strike the right balance in ensuring that councillors who take on additional responsibilities are recompensed for their time. Indeed, I'm quite often, as well as working a full-time job, up until midnight doing emails and responding to officers and going through paperwork. But I do it because I care about our community and I do it because I want to make a difference. And I'm sure, despite our differences across the chamber, that would be replicated for everyone. But we have to make sure that some of these erroneous rules which have come up across the years, such as the carers allowance, are scrapped because it does not reflect the current economic model, it doesn't reflect current pay and conditions, and we need to be fair to all those who wish to enter politics. And I believe, Mr. Mayor, that our public life would be much the poorer if people ruled themselves out of public office just because they had a disability or a caring responsibility, and actually they could contribute far more in those realms of debate and discussion and aid our decision-making process if they are present rather than absent because of something beyond their control. So I move the recommendations as I did before, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Normally interject in items, but I think the important takeaway for the public from this is, however well received and however well intentioned people giving up some of their special responsibility allowances, what we absolutely need to focus on here and what the main thrust of this is about making sure it's not about giving people money, it's about making sure those that want to stand for council aren't out of pocket. We absolutely must have those changes so that people who've got caring responsibilities aren't potentially hundreds or even thousands of pounds out of pocket by attending council meetings and putting themselves forward as councillors. I would hope that is one part of this that absolutely everyone can support. We really do need to reach out and bring us a wide and diverse group of people into being councillors as possible. We really want to represent our communities, and I feel sure everyone in this room will want to support that element of this in particular. If there's nothing else, we will move to the vote. Can I have a show of hands, all those in favour, please? Against? Abstentions? 1. Thank you very much. Right, if we can now move on to item 12, adoption of SPDs. So that's the supplementary planning documents for health impact assessment. Councillor Smith, as it's your portfolio, will you be moving the recommendation?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will. I move that the health impact assessment SPD and the open space and green infrastructure SPD be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a seconder?
I will second that, Mr. Mayor, and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any member? Councillor Condacor.
Thank you very much, Chair. It is a great disappointment we've had so few people take part in these consultations. I know this was before the current group took office, but it's been a long-standing problem. The only member of the public that took part in this consultation was my wife, Michelle. Health SPD is really, really important. We rely on it when things come to the planning committee and they would have a severe health impact on our communities. And the open spaces is so important for the well-being of our residents. It would have been really nice if the consultation had responses from GPs, people from the various groups looking after various interest groups. I mean, we do lots of good things in the borough. We do walking for health. There's all sorts of things that are positive in the borough, but they don't seem to have taken part in the consultation. So I do hope next time we take whatever steps we can to get more stakeholders involved. And the open spaces, we've got appalling things happening with some of the developers who treat open spaces as an afterthought. They put the open spaces on top of underground tanks to try and use the space twice. And of course, nothing grows on top of a concrete underground tank. You just get dead grass, etc. So open spaces, trees are really important to the quality of our borough. And I do hope this is adopted, but also it is actually improved effectively, actually, and really taken account of. Because, I mean, things like trees, we rip out so many trees when we start development, and then developers put in some half-hearted attempts at trees that then die in the first summer because they don't look after them. So I really do support having these SPDs, but also say we need them a lot stronger next time, because our borough has a very low life expectancy compared to the rest of Warwickshire. It has lots of troubles with mental health, physical health, activities, and there's so much in SPDs that can actually mean we develop a better, more sustainable borough. And particularly for developments, we can actually have green corridors. You don't just have a green bit in the corner of a development, you have green bits that join up. So actually we have wildlife corridors. And a really well-designed borough, when we do have developments, has all this open space stuff actually acting as lungs, so people can actually have their activities, do their walking, running, cycling, or just taking pictures of flowers. But we really do need to develop better and keep a check on developers. So I'm most disappointed what we've got such a poor response. I really do think we need the stakeholders like the GPs and the public health people who go to the hospital, and the public awareness people in the GP surgeries. Yeah. Get the public really involved in these health issues so we actually can have a healthier borough going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other member? Councillor Savecki.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Again, I would very much support this SPD. Like Councillor Condacourt, I'm a little bit perturbed about the lack of responses we've got from the general public, and I think we've got to learn lessons from this. We can't be allowed to keep putting forward things which are not properly consulted on, where we're not getting a wide range of responses back from our wider community and stakeholders. And I think that's something which went wrong with the old administration, which we cannot afford to allow to be repeated. I think also going forward, we need this. We need as much guidance as we can, because at the moment developers are getting away with merry hell in our borough. And I think this SPD will go a long way in trying to help address some of those issues which we have, and will therefore provide us extra weapons in our arsenal in the fight against unscrupulous developers. So I'm very much in favour of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Setwickovic. I think that's a very good point. The adoption of these supplementary planning documents that support our planning strategy. So there are no more speakers. I will go back to Councillor Wilson to sum up.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's actually Councillor Smith who gets the right of reply, but I reserve my right to speak.
You did indeed.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We're all learning in this new administration. I would agree that there has been some terrible planning decisions over the years in respect of plain open spaces. And I hope that this policy, although it was consulted upon under the previous administration, will go some way to be able to address some of the problems that we have had. And it does so by also splitting up the requirements by size of development. So if it is a small size development, it sets out what their requirements would be expected to be. And for the larger scale developments, which in fairness tend to be most of the developments we are seeing at the moment, of around about 400 plus developments creeping up, at least this will give a underpinning platform for us to go forward with. But what I would say to all members across the chamber is that we should not underestimate the power of being a councillor as a local representative. And indeed, whilst this is a starting point, a guideline, there is nothing which actually beats getting stuck in there as a local councillor and talking to those developers about what we would want to see as local ward members and getting local action groups involved. Whilst and this is my own personal experience in Golf Drive, and I know that Councillor Clark with his county hat on would also endorse this, that whilst we might object to the principle of development in those areas, which is a perfectly reasonable position to take, what we can also do is say, if this is going to go ahead, we will do the best for our local residents, both old and new, who are coming in, and try and iron out some of these issues coming forward. So you can have a say over where, within reason, obviously you're working with a developer and they will only do what is financially viable, but where they can, and you engage with them as local ward members, you can get movement over where a play area might be sited, or a community centre might be sited, or a GP surgery. And if they are prepared to play ball with you, then as local councillors, I believe we have a great influence over that. And I've seen that myself in the Golf Drive application. So whilst this policy sets a platform, an underpinning platform, we should not underestimate the influence that we have as local councillors in the planning process if we really set our mind to it. Because in fairness, some developers don't want the bad publicity. There will always be those fly-by-night developers who you cannot escape and will not listen to you. But wherever possible, I think it is incumbent upon us as local councillors to use this as a platform and then go out there and try and negotiate and agitate for the best interests of our residents. So I support the policies before us because it gives us a basis on which to work, but that does not preclude us as local members getting stuck in and actually doing the work of a ward member and speaking up for our residents and trying to negotiate some areas where we can have a bit of leeway, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Smith, you will be summing up.
I will this time, Mr Mayor. I do note and thank Councillors Condacor, Svetkovic and Wilson for their comments, all very good. I know how passionate they all are about this subject. The report recommends the Council to adopt the Health Impact Assessment Supplementary Planning Document and the Open Space and Green Infrastructure Supplementary Planning Document. Both sets of document were subject to public consultation in January and were approved at Cabinet on 23rd of June. Health impact assessments are required for all major planning applications, and the SPD will ensure a minimum standard for assessments and will aid review by the Council and other consultees. Responses to this consultation were disappointingly low, as Councillor Condacor indicated, but they were considered and have shaped the final version of the SPD, and the key changes to the SPD are set out in the report you have. The Open Space and Green Infrastructure SPD sets out the Council's expectation in terms of key principles and processes for developers to adhere to when master planning and delivering new development sites. This includes biodiversity, parks and play provision, allotments, sustainable drainage systems and accessible green network corridors. Again, the responses were considered and have shaped the final version of the SPD. The adoption of the guidance will help us to deliver high quality and sustainable development in the borough, so I recommend that these SPDs are adopted as per Council guidance.
Thank you, Councillor. It's the end of the debate. We'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendations printed? That appears to be unanimous. Thank you. Moves us on to item 13, which is Civic Honours Committee. It's due to be set up. So I'm going to ask Councillor Wilson to please, will you move the recommendations as set out in the papers?
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I move that Article 7 of the Council's Constitution be amended to incorporate the establishment of the Civic Awards Subcommittee, comprising of the Leader, the Deputy Leader, the Cabinet Member for Finance and Corporate, the Mayor and the Leader of the main opposition group. This is actually Councillor Croft's portfolio, but he isn't here due to COVID restrictions. But this is actually something I feel exceptionally passionate about. Over the past 48 years of this council's existence, we have neglected a massive part of what this council can do, which is recognising and honouring what people in our communities have done and continue to do. Whilst we continue the proud tradition of honouring our armed forces, there are also people, individuals within our community who have dedicated their lives to service of others, or indeed our country, and put their life on the line themselves as individuals. We have seen throughout the COVID pandemic the best of what people can do, and it has brought communities, streets, areas together in a way that no one ever thought possible since the Second World War. There has been a real, dare I say it, blitz spirit about the COVID pandemic, where people, in the face of adversity and difficulties, which we have never faced before, they have come together and helped people out. And there are people who have dedicated lives, whether it be in the Scouts organisation, the Girl Guides, whether it be in the Armed Forces, or other charitable foundations. They have made a difference to our community. They have enriched Nuneaton and Bedworth. And I believe that some of these tools that we have as a local council should be used. It is a crying shame that no individual has had the freedom of the borough since before the inception of Nuneaton and Bedworth. I believe indeed, Mr Mayor, you showed me the role of the freedom of the borough, and I don't think there's been anything since the 1950s or 60s from memory. And I think there are a number of people who are deserving of that accolade, and people who have dedicated their lives to the council as well. So I remember probably 10 years ago now, when I was sat roughly where Councillor Condacor is now, seconding a proposal to give the late, great Jesse Owen the freedom of the borough, someone who was a giant in this community and had dedicated his life to ensuring that the sacrifices of others would not be in vain and that they would continue to be remembered, not just within the ex-forces community, but across Nuneaton and Bedworth, ensuring that the great legacy of the Bedworth Armistice Committee was continued alongside all the other veterans of that great organisation. And yet, because of a political ploy, the then controlling group refused to actually vote through and give him the freedom of the borough, a borough he had dedicated his post-forces life to, and ensuring that the people and the children and everyone else within this borough continued to remember the purpose behind the sacrifices which have been made since the First World War and right up to the present day. And I believe that we should reinstate that civic pride and those civic opportunities to recognise people for the contributions that they have made. And it doesn't have to cost us a fortune. They are little things that we can do at very little cost, Mr Mayor, that actually mean a lot to that individual and to those communities and those organisations. So I think that it is high time, Mr Mayor, that we got this Civic Honours Committee underway, and that I would hope it would have unanimous support across this chamber, because we all know people within our communities who deserve that recognition. And I would welcome the opportunity to, if this goes through Council tonight, Mr Mayor, to sit there in this subcommittee and actually look at the great works that we have done and sing the praises to the rooftops of what some of these people have done. And I'm sure that everyone will know at least one person who will be worthy of putting forward for a nomination. And I look forward to seeing them, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a seconder? Councillor Brown, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd be absolutely honoured to second this, especially as this proposal originally came to this council from a member of the public, and I'd reserve my right to speak should we need to in any debate.
Thank you, Councillor. Any member? Councillor Condacor?
Chair, I just want to say a few things. The basic principle is really good. People really get lifted by honours. But also there's been lots of trouble at the national level with the honours system. So I do hope we have the checks and balances so that the system is used for the right people, has a good public buy-in, and doesn't fall into discredit like some of the honours given out by our national government. I know some of the people have worked really hard in this borough who really have missed out. And I know this borough has given an OBE to a previous leader of this council, which was a very strange decision in my opinion. So there's lots of things that actually make an honour system work, and there are things that make it questionable. So I would like, in setting a system up, to have a few members of the public or different stakeholders on this panel. I think the panel of 5 councillors is very councillor heavy, and I do think even if this administration uses the system wisely, I think it is important we always have checks and balances and a diverse impact. Yeah, the more different people you get involved in a panel, I think the richer it is, and particularly, I mean, it'd be a male-heavy, conservative-heavy panel at the moment. And I do think it would be quite, not that necessarily those are bad people, but it's just the diversity of people on the panel. And if you look at the back page of the report, it talks about, on page 65, it talks elected members, MPs, charities and organisations, etc., and members of the public. I think we need to reverse that order and actually have this as a public-centric awards system rather than one that's actually run by the council too heavily. Obviously the council needs to facilitate, but I think we need to look at making it more of a public honours system chosen by the public and for the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I would just like to make it clear the council cannot give out national honours. We're not, you know, it could recommend people possibly up the chain, but we can't give out national honours as the council. I just want to make that clear. Any other member, please? Oh, Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I do have to raise some concern about the amount of members in this chamber that aren't actually wearing masks when we're expecting our officers to follow the rules. I am surprised. However, moving on, I'm happy with the awards. I did mention this at OSP when it came there for us to look at, and it went back to Cabinet, that I would not like to see the community awards that Carver do disenfranchised, because it does a very good job. So, you know, it would be maybe nice to see them on these lists of people on a subcommittee, as they've been giving out the awards for a long time. As previous mayor, I have given out community awards, and actually, I think it was Councillor Navarro at the time that gave a community award out to Jesse Owens. So, while I am in favour, there is nothing in this document that says about the amount of money it might cost. So, if you could let me know what that is, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Again, I'm very much in favour of having awards. I did note that I think nobody locally was recognised in the national awards, which is it's quite sad. And I know, as you quite rightly say, we can't award them. We're not an awarding body for national awards, but we can certainly recommend. And I think there are a number of people in this borough who are deserving of that for, you know, a lifetime of achievement for what they've done. So starting at the top there, it'd be great to get some people from Nuneaton, Bedworth and Bulkington recognised for that. Moving down, again, lots and lots of people locally deserving of recognition, whether it's through stuff they've been doing during the COVID lockdowns or prior to that, and, you know, often for a number of years. It saddens me actually that they haven't been recognised, and these are not sort of people that would come forward, never speak up and say, why am I not getting something, because they are too humble for that. They just get on with it, and I think it's up to us to make sure that they are given these opportunities, and that the public have opportunities to see that, you know, good works, good deeds are sort of rewarded. And, you know, we all like a good news story, and there's a lot of good news stories out there, and we need to celebrate them. Also, by having these awards, it adds credibility to the work that these people are doing. It helps bring in funding and support when they get these sort of awards. And again, that is not to be underestimated, because a lot of funding comes in because people hear about the stories of what they're up to. So you've got a great platform here where you can push that. One of the criticisms I did hear about this is the cost financially and also on officer time. I would, however, take a slightly different point of view and say, how much money have these people saved this borough over the years in terms of work that they have done, which perhaps we should have been doing as a council and haven't done, where they've stepped in and perhaps filled in a shortfall. You know, that, again, you know, if we're going to do some sums, let's do some sums on that as well, because I'd be really interested to see those figures, because I think that shortfall has been quite considerable, and particularly probably over the last year or two with the COVID restrictions that we've had. So, you know, I think in terms of the cost won't be a huge amount, but it will mean a lot going forward. And I think it will encourage other members of the public to get involved, to do good deeds, and to make this a better borough than it already is. And it's a good borough now, but imagine what it could be if we had people volunteering, because they know that, you know, they're going to get recognised for what they're doing, and they can draw other people in because it's being advertised and shown. So very much in support. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Sekovic. So I have got Councillor Watkins next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'll be in support of this. In fact, the council did used to do it some years ago, and I was in receipt of an award from here. I forget when it was now, 2008, 2009, a long time before I was a councillor. Whilst I was mayor, it was fantastic to go around, see the individuals, groups, and as you're beginning to find out now, Mr. Mayor, all the good work that goes on within this borough. So it'd be good to recognise some of the people. My only concern is with the Carver. I just don't want to detract from that, because they do a very similar award, and one which you'll be getting invited to, no doubt, Mr. Mayor. But over this past 18 months with COVID, there's outstanding people out there that deserve award, and perhaps Carver can't pick them up. So if they can't pick them up, then perhaps we can. So I'm more than in favour with this, and pleased to be on the panel. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Councillor Golby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To come back on a couple of points that have been raised, it's nice of Councillor Kundaka to point out that not all Conservatives are bad people. Thank you very much. It's on 3.2, should the Civic Honours Subcommittee be established, one of its first tasks will be producing its draft terms of reference. So that is where all this starts. This is the shall we do it, yes or no. When we do it, then we'll get the terms of reference in place. And I'm sure we can all accommodate the request from Carver and et cetera, to be involved. However, I wouldn't want to replicate the awards that Carver do, because they are, for want of a better word, service in a different sector. Carver don't do civic awards. These are civic awards, not community awards. So we want to make sure that they are different. I don't believe Carver can award the freedom of the borough to anybody. Whereas we could. And again, on 3.2, early task of the Civic Honours Committee will be to explore any financial implications that may arise from bestowing different types of civic awards and honours. So again, the financial implications will be picked up as part of the early explorations into this going ahead. This is not a yes or no and then get off and start awarding people. This is a yes or no, and then we'll start the investigations on how feasible it is. Just to also reiterate, we are operating in a COVID secure manner as well. So I want to make that point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Golby. Councillor Walmsley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I actually want to continue 3.2, a section that Councillor Golby didn't come to, which is a mechanism to allow for nominations of civic awards to be submitted by a range of stakeholders, including elected members, members of parliament, charities and other public service sector organisations operating in the borough, and members of the public. We've had some naysay this evening, but let me be very clear. Let me make this direct appeal to everybody at home. Get thinking. If there is somebody who has helped you, helped your community, helped our borough to be a better place, we want to hear. We want to know. And I am grateful for the cabinet members that have spoken this evening are clearly on board with making sure those people are recognised through civic honours through our borough. We want to hear from you. We want every option and all options. So let's really get awarding and recognising people in our society that have done some amazing and tremendous things. We're open, we're listening, and we want to carry out your will. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. So I didn't have any other speakers. Councillor Brown, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I would just like to reiterate almost everything that I've heard from Councillor Walmsley and Councillor Golby, who explained brilliantly what this is all about. These are civic awards to express pride and to reward people who have dedicated their lives and their service to this borough and achieved great things, often in a small way, but things that are meaningful to the communities they live in. And speaking as somebody, we have an awards ceremony called the People Awards at the place where I work, introduced the past few years. It's been one of the greatest things to drive engagement with people at the place I work. And if we can replicate a tenth of the enthusiasm those awards have generated by these civic awards, we will bring something very special to this borough. So I would absolutely support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So, Councillor Wilson, do you want to reply?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't see the Civic Awards scheme being mutually exclusive to any other award scheme being done by any other group or community action within Nuneaton and Bedworth. I see this as mutually beneficial, that it recognises that there are a wide range of people within our community who get out there and recognise what is being done, and if they happen to overlap, that's great. If there is work we can do with Carver, I'm all for it. But as Councillor Golby said, and as the report itself says, this is just about establishing the principle of a civic honours committee, and then we can work out the terms of reference, how we consult with other organisations and the general public itself, and then also work out the actual finances, because depending on who we award the finances could be wildly different. So if you are looking at, for example, a new regiment came into Bramcote and we wanted to forge and cement those ties, giving them the freedom of the borough to parade through the town centre, bayonets fixed and drums beating, that's going to involve a lot more finances in terms of policing and fencing off and event marshalling, etc., than an individual receiving the freedom of the borough for the works they have done over a number of years, receiving a certificate, probably on better quality paper than the A4 paper we're printed on tonight, I would hope, and affixed with the seal of the borough and presented by the mayor in his finery. I would imagine you would be looking £20 to £30 for something like that, for the paper and the printing and then affixing the seal. Whereas you would be looking at least £1,000 or £2,000 for a event of the magnitude of a march through the town centre. A certificate as part of the community awards would be pence in comparison to that. And also I'm aware that there have been over the years a supply of awards within the Mayor's Parlour which have not been used but have been purchased at public expense. They are there somewhere. I've had conversations with Brent about this in the past, that there are some there. And why don't we put those to use? We've already spent the money. Let's get them out there, dust them off and down, have them out of the cupboard and on someone's mantelpiece where they belong, Mr. Mayor. They shouldn't be sheltered away in the Mayor's Parlour. As lovely as your parlour is, Mr. Mayor, I think they would be far more decorative and rewarding and meaningful to someone on their mantelpiece, having had a small, modest event here at the Town Hall with yourself and other civic dignitaries or councillors who wish to attend. I think that is a far better way to go. Let's actually just get the job moving. Let's get the first meeting set up. Let's get August out of the way first, because we all deserve a break at least. And then get to the work of setting up the Civic Honours Committee and actually rewarding the people who have done their job, whether it be someone who has been coordinating COVID response in their community or the dinner lady who has retired after 40 years service. Let's get out there and reward these people who have done tremendous work for us, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. So we're going to move to the vote. Can I have a show of hands, all those in favour? That appears to be unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to item 14 now, recommendations from Cabinet and other committees. They are largely audit and standards. So 14A, consider proposed change to the Constitution. Can I call upon Councillor Walmsley as chair of that committee to present?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I move the recommendation to Council that our Constitution be updated accordingly as per those items set out in our order paper this evening. Mr Mayor, what these changes do broadly is to bring into line and refresh our Constitution back to a more open, more democratic and more accountable time before the meddling of now disgraced Labour members that are no longer in this chamber. The reforms that were undertaken at the time, and we said so at the time, were undemocratic. They limited questions, they stifled debate, and they frankly trounced upon the rights of many councillors in this chamber. I am pleased, as probably one of the loudest critics of those changes, to be the person that is able to move tonight that we reverse and we revert back to a point in time that was more democratic. But Mr Mayor, this is not the end. No, no, no. We have established, or we are finishing to establish, the Constitutional Review Working Party, where we will look and we will make our Constitution even more open, even more democratic, and even more accountable. We want greater say for councillors, we want greater access and rights for the public, and they will be delivered. So, Mr Mayor, tonight is just the starting point. The one item that I want to pick up specifically is in relation to the co-opted members at the moment. At the moment, we had two overview and scrutiny panels, and we had one audit and standards panel. We had a potential for up to 6 co-opted members. At that time, those positions were not full, and out of those 6, we only had 4 across those 4 panels. So what we have done as part of this process is to continue with those co-opted members, but actually spread them so that they are on one panel, one co-opted member per panel, in the way in which effectively the system operated previously. So we're making the system operate how it worked. Mr Mayor, unfortunately, we did have a recruitment exercise in an attempt to appoint additional co-opted members to panels. This was not run by myself. This was run under the previous administration prior to the election. But as I understand it, there were 3 applications brought forward, and upon inspection and upon interview, for various reasons, those 3 individuals were unable to be appointed because they did not meet the criteria as laid down. As a result, Mr Mayor, we are seeking in this, in addition, to make sure that we reflect the position as we find ourselves, is updating our Constitution accordingly, and to make sure that that everything is tidy in that Constitution, sir. So as I say, the reforms, the majority of what is in this item, is a reset back to the constitution that we had back in 2018 that is more democratic, more open and more accountable. It builds upon the reforms that were brought through at the previous at the annual council, which in itself started that process. And I am sure, Mr. Mayor, before long we shall be back here in this chamber debating upon and hopefully passing through yet more reforms to make our borough great again. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor. I need a seconder.
I will second that, Mr. Mayor, and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Any member? Councillor Condacor.
Thank you, Mayor. It's me again. A couple of things are really welcome in these changes. The free sentence rule was a total ridiculous rule. And as you'll find out in my question later on, having your question twisted to make it exactly 3 sentences when you have 6 things to say produces a nonsense sentence. It's all ands and buts and whatever. So I really do welcome actually having questions short, but actually not having a rule you can only use 3 sentences. It's interesting in the public's questions tonight that actually the rule was broken by quite a few of those, and we seem to allow them to go, particularly, they're quite long statements, particularly Mr. Margrave seems to go on and on quite a lot. So I do think we need to be careful to have rules that keep the flow going. The other thing I'd say about independent members, they're really, really important. The first time I was on audit, we had someone with a lot of business experience from the health service, and she could ask proper questions of our staff, which us who haven't run large businesses weren't capable of asking. So I do think, particularly the audit function, it is really useful to get people with business expertise. And so I would say we try and get 2 on the audit committee, and maybe someone from a business background, because they do understand so much more. I mean, I'm quite bright. I know a lot about business, but having someone who's actually run either a part of an NHS business or an independent business, someone who's got experience going through accounts and stuff, and I think that was really valuable, and we've lost that at the moment. So I do think we need to review again only having 1 member on audit, and I do think more independent people on audit would help to calm audit down. It is quite political, and I won't go through all the things that have gone on, but I think independence is really important for something like standards and audit, where we're actually just trying to make sure everyone plays by rules and people are being respectful to each other. And finally, I think in reviewing the questions from members and from the public, we should look about not allowing questions to attack a named individual without that individual being able to reply. Because I've suffered it from in the past, from the good old days. Yeah, a member asked another member, didn't Councillor Kandaka want to build houses behind his house, or all these sort of questions. I think questions do need to allow a person being named be actually to respond to the question as well as a cabinet member. Otherwise, the thing becomes a game, which is not in the public interest. If you really want to ask a question and you name an individual, that individual should have the right to reply. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. So, Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. In regard to the documents, I'm quite happy with it, except for 2.1 in regard to reducing the co-opted members. They are very useful on the committees, and I think, you know, when we've just been talking about wanting more residents to become councillors, this is a way of some members of residents who aren't politically motivated to actually maybe want to get involved within the council. So I would ask the chair of the committee to reconsider and go out again to seek other members of the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next I have Councillor Kenner.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mayor, sorry. I'll definitely be supporting these recommendations this evening. Since I was in my late teens, I've been watching full council meetings either up there or at home on Microsoft Teams, and I've I've just been watching democracy be eroded in the borough, to be honest. I've seen the damage the Labour Party has done to democracy, to openness and transparency. And I think these recommendations will make politics in the borough more attractive for people to get involved with, whether it's people who've been running businesses, whether it's long-standing community champions, or young people, who I think we need a great deal more of in the borough, and I'm happy that the two youngest councillors are both Conservative. So I will be supporting these recommendations tonight, Mr Mayor, and I'm delighted that Councillor Walmsley's brought them forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next I've got Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Like Councillor Kenner, I'm not your typical millennial. Instead of watching Love Island on a Wednesday night, I will probably be watching a full council meeting on YouTube or a scrutiny panel. I actually think, in response to Councillor Kandaka, that we actually did a lot of great work on the audit committee over the last 12 months, in particular when it come to holding the Civic Hall to account, when it come to that, gross financial misconduct as a result of the internal audit report. And I don't think it was political. The audit committee has a job to scrutinise a Section 151 officer and how they control the council's finances, and I think it's done a relatively good job. I agree with Councillor Kenner. As somebody who, I got involved in politics because I was just so annoyed by the crazy proposals in the borough plan to build on the Bedworth Woodlands floodplain. And I sort of started this by sitting on one of those really horrible benches at the back there, which really hurts your back after a while, listening to these debates and asking questions, etc. And it has eroded. I mean, it's just silly restricting members of the public and councillors just 3 sentences. It's just weird and crazy. One of the things that I do welcome in these amendments, and I'm happy to stand corrected if I'm wrong, but I understand that members will be able to move motions after questions. That is something that actually brought about a lot of debate. But unfortunately, it was a decision of the previous Labour Council to completely remove that. There were, fortunately, the Mayor used his casting vote to erode that from the Constitution, and I regret that decision. So yeah, I do support it, and I know that Councillor Walmsley, as chair, has talked about the Constitutional Review Working Party, and I perhaps think one of the things that his party, which he will be chairing, should look at is replicating the system used at Warwickshire County Council in order to allow our